You're listening to Christensen Astrology with me, Victoria, and in this episode I'm gonna teach you how to cast your own natal chart and understand what you're looking at. And if you wish to understand your own natal chart even deeper, or if you're going through a transitional phase of your life, you can always reach out to me for a private consultation or a recorded reading. And I also teach more advanced astrology, so if that's of your interest, you can find all the information in the description box below. One of the things that I love the most about astrology is that its relevance has stood the test of time. So astrology is actually one of the oldest recorded symbolic languages of human history. Just think about that. So I decided that in this video I'm going to teach you the foundations, the technical foundations on how to cast your own birth chart, how to use the whole sign system, and also I want to put you into the mindset of understanding what I always tell my students, which is astrology is not intuition first. Astrology is technical skill first, because once you understand the technical skill set and you understand that in many ways astrology is mathematical, it's geometrical, it's about recognizing patterns and symbolisms in a very strategic way, then you can move on to become a great interpreter of the art form as well. But you don't do that without understanding the basics. And one thing that kind of surprised me the most is that a lot of people tend to have a great knowledge on a surface level of astrology. However, understanding basics like what is the difference between Placidus and whole sign, why is the Zodiac sign wheel round, what does it mean, will the planets be placed in the same way if you use different systems, those basic understandings are not really widespread because pop astrology today tend to skip that part and go directly into interpreting things before having a basic understanding of planetary positions, symbolic language, mythology, astronomy, and that's just something I find very important to give on to you guys, and because I truly believe that astrology should be taught to even children in school from an early age. It's sort of like one of these trustworthy guides that can be of great help to understand ourselves on this ride called life, and to help us expand our experience of existence and understand the broader piece of the puzzle that we play in this cosmos. And just to remind you, I'm a practitioner of Western traditional astrology and I use the whole sign system, so this is what I will be teaching you in this class. Enjoy! So the first thing that you do is to find a great free source to cast your own natal chart. I recommend astro.com. AstroSeek is okay as well, but I found that it has some inconsistencies in regard to asteroid placements, so I prefer astro.com for a free source, although personally I use my own software system, but I want you guys to know that there are completely free resources that you can use today. And what you do here, you can see that you go to My Astro. If you don't have a profile already, you can create one for free. And then you go on to the left side and you push the bottom horoscope drawings and data. And what you want to do is you want to choose the extended chart section. And if you manage to make your profile correctly, you will see that you now have the horoscope for yourself or any other person that you chose to put the birth data in for. That looks something along these lines. First and foremost, you want to choose the round version. You want to go for a natal chart wheel here. Then just let the default style be on. The start date, don't be confused about that one. It's only relevant for the transit, so you can just leave it to the date that you are doing this. And finally, you want to make sure under the zodiac and the houses that you have put it to whole signs, and that you have put the zodiac to tropical as well. And then basically after that you can skip the last steps on that page and go directly to show the chart. So now that you have your natal chart in front of you, the first thing that I want you to remember is that this is a blueprint. This is the map of the sky, the moment that you were born, the moment that you took your first breath. And it offers you insight into so many beautiful areas of your life. It can become a trusted friend, a trusted confidant. And when you start to understand astrology correctly and know how to interpret the different layers, you will see that it's a never-ending love story. It just becomes bigger and more vast, and you will see that there are always new layers to unlock once you get a hang of it. Another thing is that astrology is one of the oldest recorded symbolic systems in human history, as I told you in the intro, and I find this truly fascinating and important for you to know, because some of the earliest documented forms of astrology emerged from ancient Mesopotamia over 4,000 years ago. So you can imagine that at that time, Babylonian scholars, they carefully looked at the planetary movements and then they recorded their correlations with earthly events. And that sort of became the foundation from which astrology grew into being developed further into Hellenistic Egypt and Greece, where the system of the natal chart as we know it today started to take shape, and that was around the first centuries of BCE. And then afterwards, we see that there are different variations of astrological practice that started to arise in India and Persia in the Islamic Golden Age, and then later on in medieval Europe. So for most of history, astrology was studied alongside astronomy and medicine and philosophy, and it was obviously for the privileged, because astrologers were consulted by rulers, by scholars, by physicians, as sort of like a framework to understand character and timing and get insights to the next steps to make. And I think it's so important to learn to read a birth chart, because it is a way of connecting with a symbolic ancient language. And then you can see how the sky becomes a mirror for you, and you can see how through this reflection you can start to understand your own potential and your own patterns. And I always tell my students that astrology is not intuition first. Astrology is structure first. Because before you can interpret a birth chart, you must really understand how it is built. And there are two distinct layers to astrology. The first layer is the technical foundation, which you will spend quite a lot of time to really understand and master, and this is what we will be touching on the surface today. And then the second layer is the interpretative skill that takes quite a lot of mastering as well, and just years of learning how to read different birth charts and read the sky. But nonetheless, this is the foundation, so that you really start to get this idea under the skin that in order to make sentences and to read, you need to learn the alphabet first. This is kind of the same metaphor we have in astrology in regards to the technical foundation. One of the first technical decisions that you will have to make is which house system to use. And the two most common ones in Western astrology are Placidus and Whole Sign. And as I told you in the intro, I will be showing this in Whole Sign. However, it is important for you to know that the planetary positions do not change across systems. The only thing that changes is how the houses are divided. And sometimes I also choose to cast a chart in Placidus if I find that I have a client where this might make sense, where there could be a lot of planets that would be changing houses depending on the degree and positions as well. And then I cross-check using Placidus just to see if there are significant shifts, and I note them down because I find that it can add an additional layer of information, and sometimes depending on the question from my client, I will be able to dive deeper and have some solid insights using both systems. But for today, the primary framework will remain Whole Sign. And many of my students really enjoy when I make a visual examples where Placidus is next to whole sign for the same chart. So you can take a look at the screen here and you can see how they look different, that they are not equally divided in the Placidus. And that's because Placidus is dividing the space between the ascendant and the midheaven using time-based calculations. I think that's the simplest way that I can put it. And because of this, you can see that the houses are often unequal in size. Some houses will be larger than 30 degrees, and sometimes the signs can also be split between the houses. And on top of it, some signs may not even appear on any house or any cusp, and these are called interceptions. So basically this means that a planet may fall in a different house in Placidus than it would in a whole sign. So Placidus can be useful when we work very closely with house cusp degrees, and especially if a planet sits very close to a house boundary. Alternatively, we can see here the chart cast in whole sign, where you can see that it used the zodiac signs themselves as houses, and it will always be beginning with the ascendant sign on the first house, and then each house is exactly 30 degrees in size, because obviously we have this wheel that is equivalent to 360 degrees. So in whole sign houses, we have the entire sign of the ascendant, and then that becomes the first house. We then have the next sign, that is the second house, and so forth. And each house equals exactly 30 degrees. There is no signs that are split, and you will see no interceptions. And you can see how the structure of a whole sign house is very clean, very symmetrical, and that each house aligns with the full zodiac sign, and therefore also create a very clear and consistent framework to work with, which is why I enjoy it so much. So in other words, you can see that there are different structural approaches to organize the same kind of sky. So now that we have established a basic understanding between the Placidus and the whole sign systems in Western traditional astrology, we can move ahead and look to the structure of a chart through the lens of whole signs. And I like to say that it's very helpful to look at the chart and understand 3 layers first. So we have to understand it through the planets, then the zodiac signs, and then the houses as well. So you can start to think of it this way, that we have the planets, and the planets are the actors. Then we have the zodiac signs that will describe how these actors will be playing. And then finally we have the 12 houses, where you will see that the movie plays out. And those 12 houses, which I will return to, represent different parts of our life, different arenas. Same goes with the planets. Planets are sort of the archetype, imprints, and areas of perception of life. And then we have the zodiac signs that in many ways, again, is the characteristics of a specific archetype, a specific way of acting in life, a specific way of experiencing life as well. And in addition to all of this, we have the major angles or structural points in the chart. You can see it as sort of like a cross or like a skeleton, and the ascendant is the rising sign on the eastern horizon at the time you were born, and then the descendant is the direct opposite of the ascendant, so that's on the western horizon at the time you were born, and those are always in the same degree. So if you, for instance, have an ascendant that is at 8 degrees, your descendant will also be at 8 degrees. Just something that my students often will ask about. You can also see in this chart that is not directly pointed out where the IC line is, but that is on the direct opposite on the MC line. So that goes after the same principle. And the MC is the highest point of the chart, whereas the IC is the lowest point of the chart. And symbolically, you can see how that makes sense, because the highest point is associated with your public life, where you can be seen. And the IC line is the lowest point associated with, your privacy, your home, your roots, and so forth. So now that we have the very basic structures of a birth chart, I want to address the difference between a day chart and a night chart when it comes to the planets, because that's something I see that even astrologers tend to skip, but it's actually quite important, if not crucial, for a natal chart reading. So when we look to a day chart, we have to know that the Sun, Jupiter and Saturn are more at home here. So the great benefic planet Jupiter, he tends to express himself and his qualities more easily in a day chart. And the sides of Saturn that are usually quite difficult tend to be more moderated in a day chart. Whereas if we take a look at Mars, it's the complete opposite, and Mars tends to be the more difficult child in a day chart. Then when we take a look at a night chart, we will see that the Moon, Venus and Mars are more at home here. So we have Venus as the great benefic of a night chart, because here she can express her qualities more easily and is more benefic than Jupiter. Then we have Mars, who's also less of a difficult child here and generally more balanced, more moderated in a night chart. But then on the contrary, we have Saturn. Saturn tends to become more difficult in a night chart, and he tends to be highlighted. His limited sides, his structural side, tends to become more potent in a night chart. And I wanted to address this already in the fundamentals so that you get a hang of it, because I've seen so many times that there are some interpretations and approaches to a natal chart that can change quite fundamentally depending on whether it's a night or a day chart. So just have that in mind as well. So now that we have established all of this, let's go a bit further into what we call the big threes, which is the Sun, the Moon and your Ascendant. And usually, if I have to put it very minimalistic, we can say that these three describe different layers of the self. So the sun sign that you are is the person that you're becoming throughout life. And we can say that the moon is in many ways how you feel and express emotion. And then we have the ascendant, that is how you move through the world. So when we look to it through a whole sign practice, we already know that the ascendant determines the houses, and then the houses determine the life areas, and then the ruler of the ascendant becomes the chart ruler. And this is important to know. So always look to what is in the first house, what is the ascendant, then look to the planet that is the ruling of that zodiac sign, and then you will have the chart ruler. And the chart ruler becomes one of the most important planets in your chart because it describes the overall direction and tone of your life or tone of the person's natal chart that you're looking at. And speaking of the 12 signs and their rulers, let's go through all 12 of them so that you have sort of a reference point to begin with. So Aries is direct, it's initiating, it's bold, competitive and action-oriented, and it represents the drive and independence, and it's obviously the first sign of the zodiac, so it's also one of the youngsters, so to speak. It's all about impulse and so forth. And the traditional ruler of Aries is Mars, and the modern ruler is Mars as well. Then we have Taurus. Taurus is known as the steady and practical, sensual, patient and grounded, and it represents stability and material security and also persistence. And the traditional ruler of Taurus is Venus, and the modern ruler is Venus as well. Then we have Gemini. Gemini is curious, it's communication, it's adaptable and quick thinking, and also very mentally active. And it represents the information and exchange and learning and versatility. And the traditional ruler of Gemini is Mercury, and the modern ruler is Mercury as well. Then we have Cancer. Well, Cancer is connected to being emotional and protective and intuitive and nurturing and sensitive. And it represents home and memory and security and emotional bonding. And the traditional ruler is the moon, and the modern ruler is the moon as well. And then we have Leo. Leo is expressive and confident and creative, sometimes dramatic and leadership oriented. And Leo represents the identity and pride and the desire to shine. And its traditional ruler is the sun, and the modern ruler is the sun as well. Then we have Virgo. Virgo is analytical and detail-oriented, practical, discerning, and improvement focused, and it represents refinement and service and precision. The traditional ruler here is Mercury, the same as Gemini, and the modern ruler is also Mercury, just as Gemini. Then we have Libra. Well, Libra is relational and diplomatic and balanced and aesthetic and harmony seeking. It represents partnership and fairness and social equilibrium. The traditional ruler is Venus, and the modern ruler is Venus as well, which is shared with Taurus. Then we have Scorpio. Scorpio is known to be intense and private and strategic and transformative as well, and emotionally deep. It represents the power and control and psychological depth. The traditional ruler of Scorpio is Mars, and the modern ruler is Pluto. Then we have Sagittarius. Well, Sagittarius is expansive and optimistic, philosophical, adventurous, and truth-seeking, and it represents belief systems and travel and higher learning. The traditional ruler here is Jupiter, and the modern ruler of Sagittarius is also Jupiter. Then we have Capricorn. Well, Capricorn is disciplined and ambitious, responsible, structured, and long-term oriented. It represents authority and achievement and endurance. The traditional ruler is Saturn, and the modern ruler is Saturn as well. Then we have Aquarius. Aquarius is independent and unconventional and intellectual and future-oriented and socially aware, is the true humanitarian, and it represents innovation, reform, and in general also the collective vision. And the traditional ruler of Aquarius is Saturn, whereas the modern ruler is Uranus. And then finally we have Pisces. Pisces is intuitive and imaginative and compassionate, fluid and spiritually very sensitive. And it represents transcendence and empathy and dissolution of boundaries. The traditional ruler of Pisces is Jupiter, whereas the modern ruler is Neptune. And also finally, I will say to all of these that we count through the Zodiac wheel. So we always start with Aries, which is number 1, and all the way through to Pisces, which is number 12. And also understand that the circle goes like this. We have the beginning of something, the initiation, the spark with Aries, and then we have the very mature and all-encompassing Pisces, 12 and final stop, where also it makes a lot of sense that, Pisces is the sign that embodies all the other zodiac signs in many ways and the traits thereafter. So that might also be a nice little add-on to this very brief introduction. And as a foundational structure, it's also really nice to get a hang of the planets, their speed, and the core meaning. So let me just introduce you to a few of these as well. So the faster a planet moves, the more personal and immediate the influence tends to be. So the slower it moves, it is more a generational theme. However, we can still talk about its personal influence and the individual, depending on the degree, the house, and the aspect that the planet has in your specific birth chart. So first we have the moon. The moon changes sign approximately every 2.5 days, and it completes the zodiac in about 27-28 days. And the moon represents emotions, instincts, memory, the body, and how we respond to life. That's also why when we look to the sky around new moon or full moon, that we can get some quite precise readings of the moment and understand how that influences us. Then we have Mercury. Mercury changes signs roughly every 3 to 4 weeks and stays very close to the sun. And Mercury represents the mind, communication, thinking patterns, learning, and exchange. Then we have Venus, and Venus changes signs about every 3 to 4 weeks. and it represents attraction and relationship, values, pleasure, beauty, and harmony. Then we have the Sun. The Sun changes sign every month, as we know, throughout the entire year, so that we have all the 12 zodiac signs represented here. And the Sun is about identity, our vitality, will, purpose, and the conscious self-expression. Then we have Mars. Mars changes sign approximately every 6 to 7 weeks and represents action, drive, desire, conflict, courage, and assertion. Then moving on to Jupiter. Jupiter changes signs about once per year, so it takes about 12 years to complete the entire zodiac wheel, and it represents growth, expansion, belief systems, opportunity, and wisdom. And Jupiter is also called the planet of luck. Then we have Saturn. Saturn changes signs roughly every 2.5 years and complete its spin around the zodiac sign in about 29-30 years. And Saturn represents structure, responsibility, discipline, boundaries, and maturation. Now moving on to the outer planets, we have Uranus. Uranus changes signs about every 7 years and takes 84 years to move through the entire zodiac wheel. So it represents disruption, innovation, rebellion, awakening, and sudden change. Then we have Neptune, also an outer planet. So Neptune changes signs approximately every 14 years and takes about 165 years to complete the zodiac. And it represents dreams, spirituality, illusion, imagination, and dissolution of boundaries. And then finally, of the outer planets, we have Pluto, and Pluto remains in the sign between 12 to 30 years, and it takes about 248 years to complete the entire zodiac wheel. So it's a very slow-moving planet and also very unpredictable in many ways, and it represents transformation, power, intensity, regeneration, and deep psychological change. And although I'm only touching this on the surface, I wanted to give you these timelines so that you can start to get a hang of, the personal planets that moves fast, and then the outer planets that are more generational. And if you're curious about the more astronomical and mythological meaning about these planets, I already have a series of Pluto and Saturn up that you might want to listen to if you want to go even deeper. And then, of course, we also have the retrograde periods of these planets that then sometimes changes the amount of time that the planet spent in one of the zodiac signs. And if you're curious about diving into the deep astronomical, mythological, and symbolical meaning of these planets, check out my channel as well, because I have a deep dive and series on all of these planets that you can check out. Even though I would say it's more advanced astrology, so if you are a beginner, that might be quite a lot of knowledge to take in. So that was already quite a lot of information, particularly if you are fairly new to astrology, but I really recommend for you to go back and listen to this video quite a few times, take notes on your own, and hopefully by now you will have an understanding on how to cast your own birth chart in the whole sign system, and then you can start to bring the pieces together. There's so much more that I could go into, but I think this foundational start is quite comprehensive in itself, so I hope you enjoyed it, and please remember to like and subscribe to my channel, and I hope to catch you in another video. Bye for now.